Hi and welcome to today's video. So we will be looking at what is known as the product and the process approach to writing. So basically with the product approach, as the name suggests, it focuses very closely on the actual final product. And that means that you pay very close attention to a model text and you do as much as possible to replicate what is presented in that model text in the final product. So, for example, there is a lot of emphasis on analyzing the language, the grammatical structure, the register. So, in terms of register, we mean how formal it is, the style. Is it formal? Is it informal? And then you study closely and try to replicate a text that is as close to the model text as possible. On the other hand, the process approach to writing, as the name suggests, focuses more on the process. So you start off by thinking. Thinking is actually a starting point. So you gather ideas, you organize those ideas in order to formulate a plan, and then from the plan, you'll proceed to produce a first draft of the written text. Now, that first draft will serve as a scaffold where you will look at it, you'll refine it, you'll edit it, you may submit it to your teacher or supervisor or anybody who can actually check for you and be able to give you feedback on the actual writing itself. And then when you receive that feedback, you'll look at what you've done well and obviously make sure, that's consistent throughout. And there will be comments on things that you need to improve. And of course, you'll make sure that you apply as much of that feedback to the first draft. Then you will produce a second draft. And it's likely that the second draft will go through the same kind of process. You will submit it. Now, you may get feedback again to produce a final draft, or the second draft may be the final draft. However, just standard practice, it's a first draft, second draft, and a final draft. But because it is a process approach and the focus is on the actual process, really, there is no finite amount of time that you can reproduce the text, edit it, redraft it in order to get to a really good final product. You may be allowed to submit a draft only once or maybe twice. However, what the process approach actually does is help you to review, reflect, and be critical to your own writing. So really, you can do as many drafts as necessary, making the necessary amendments, editing, proofreading in order to get to a really good quality final draft. And that is why we call this the process approach, because the focus is on the process from the initial stages where you're thinking, gathering ideas, formulating a plan, and then using that plan to create the first draft, second draft, and as many drafts needed before you get to the final draft, which is known as the process approach. So why do we differentiate them? Obviously, they are different processes. Like one, like I said, focuses on the end product. So it's very much a close replica in terms of language, in terms of style, register, grammatical structure to the model text, whereas the process approach is all about the actual journey from the starting point to the finish point. Now, both approaches have their advantages. I definitely favor the process approach because I think it's one where you can really teach students to be independent, to be able to review, reflect, and be critical in their own academic writing, which of course is a skill that they can master and use, for a lifetime in any situation. And it's also appropriate for any genre of writing. It could be academic writing, creative writing, even poetry. So the process approach definitely encourages creativity, criticality, and independence, and of course, autonomy for students. However, the product approach, which, like I said, is quite controlled, also does serve a purpose, especially when you are writing for timed assessments or written exams. For example, the IELTS exams, task 1 and task 2, the objective is to produce a piece of writing that can score you a really high mark in order to get the required grades for IELTS. And if you think of IELTS, what IELTS is basically it's a language testing system. So the objective is to actually pass. Of course, you do want to write well, and it does help you write well, but what you're focusing on is looking at model writing tasks, model essays, model answers, model text, and replicating as much as possible, like I said, the language, the grammatical style, the grammatical structure, the register, so that you have as close to the model text as possible. And that's actually very good for IELTS writing tasks 1 and 2, because that controlled practice where you're replicating as much as possible the actual model text, that helps you to really get used to writing in timed circumstances and on a range of topics. You know, the IELTS topics are quite specific, and you know, if you practice and practice and practice, then you become accustomed to, and it becomes easier for you. And of course, you know, if you can master that, you'll be able to do very well in tasks 1 and task 2. So I would definitely say for timed writing exams, the product approach, where you practice under timed conditions, usually works well, especially because the product approach is very time effective, and it's a controlled practice. So it does serve its purpose specifically for writing exams and where you know, you're doing any kind of timed assessment. However, for essays and projects and research, definitely the process approach is one where as a better approach, and it's one that I tend to favor very greatly when teaching my own students, and also myself as a writer and as a researcher. So let's review both approaches, the product and the process approach, and just have a look at the key points so that you get a better, clearer understanding of what each entails. So the product approach to writing is an approach with focus on the final text that needs to be produced. There is usually no need to generate ideas in the form of a mind map or brainstorm at the start. Instead, more time is spent on analysing and practicing the main features of the text required to be produced. Usually the stages are as follows: reading the model text, controlled practice, then moving on to the stage of generating ideas before producing the final product. On the other hand, the process approach to writing is an approach with focus on the process of producing the final text, staged from the beginning to the end. There is usually a lot of focus on the initial thinking stages prior to starting writing, producing drafts, revising, editing, and improving upon receiving feedback before producing the final text. Usually the stages are as follows: pre-writing, which then leads to planning; writing, revising and redrafting. Of course, this can be done as many times as necessary; editing before producing a final draft. So I hope that explanation there of the two approaches, the product and the process approach, has given you a clear indication of how, you know, you can use both approaches for specific types of writing. Like I said, the product approach is one where it's very good for mastering exam techniques in writing, specifically for exams like IELTS and, you know, the task 1 and task 2 that exam entails. Whereas the process approach is one where it's a very good approach for mastering that, you know, you can use throughout it's a lifetime skill as an independent writer, a professional writer in a variety of genres. So make sure you join me for the rest of the month, where I'm going to be focusing on writing specifically for IELTS. So if you are somebody who is preparing for an IELTS examination, or you want to master your IELTS writing techniques, please make sure to thumbs up this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. And of course, join me in my private academic English community, where you have access to a plethora of video tutorials and materials in order to help you improve your academic English in writing, reading, and of course speaking. So I look forward to welcoming you there, and you'll see me in my next video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.